Hello, everybody. David Schuster here. One of America's most conservative and highly respected judges is now speaking out about Donald Trump, and he's doing it in terms as dramatic as you will ever hear. Michael Luttig was a circuit judge in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and his opinions were often compared to the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia in terms of their intellectual rigor, clarity, and power. And Luttig on MSNBC just spoke about Donald Trump.
The president's words are perhaps the most important words ever spoken by a president of the United States. And I believe that the story about the words that he spoke is one of the most important stories of our times.
Luttig is referring to Donald Trump's recent interview on NBC's Meet the Press. During the interview, Trump was asked about the U.S. Supreme Court ordering Trump to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. Garcia is the Maryland father who was deported out of the United States by the Trump administration without due process and now sits in a jail in El Salvador. Under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, all people in the United States are required to receive due process.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said. What you said is not what I heard the Supreme Court said. They have a different interpretation.
Some people around Trump in the White House, including Stephen Miller, his deputy chief of staff, seem to have defined the word facilitate in the U.S. Supreme Court order a bit differently than the word seems to imply as the Supreme Court wrote out. In any case, Trump and his White House are essentially not doing much of anything to trigger or spark Abrego Garcia's return to the United States. And the warning flag for Judge Luttig was when Trump was asked by NBC if he, Trump, felt the need to abide by the Constitution.
The temptation here is to dismiss the president's words as just another gaffe, of which he makes many. But I don't think that we should do that. I'm quite confident that the president was saying what is on his mind, and that is that he, the president of the United States, doesn't necessarily believe that he is obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States as it is interpreted by the Supreme Court. This is the school of constitutional denialism, as I have said. There's long been this strain of conservative constitutional thought in America. I've studied it, thought about it, wrestled with it for 45 years of my own career. And that strain and school of constitutional thought believes that the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution is not necessarily what the Constitution says or means.
As you might imagine, that school of thought that you can simply ignore the U.S. Supreme Court when it interprets the Constitution differently than you want, well, that is extremely controversial. Last year, J.D. Vance made the same suggestion and generated headlines for days. Judge Luttig notes that our entire system of justice, the rule of law in the United States, would be upended if Donald Trump really does subscribe to this constitutional denialism.
I believe this is one of, if not the single most important issue of our times. That issue being for the President of the United States to tell the American people exactly what he does believe about his constitutional obligation to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
And Judge Luttig noted that in another part of the NBC interview, Donald Trump also hedged on upholding due process, and that irrespective of what the Supreme Court says or rules, Donald Trump does not believe that he or his White House need to afford due process to the migrants that the Trump administration has deported unlawfully. And again, that is in direct defiance. It contradicts a U.S. Supreme Court order. Judge Luttig said that Donald Trump should publicly declare, publicly articulate what he believes and what he intends in all of this. And as a public remedy, the judge noted that the U.S. Constitution is not a document that accounts for this kind of president of the United States.
The premise of the Constitution, the underlying assumption of the Constitution, one, is that America would never have a president of the United States who even thought about not upholding the Constitution of the United States, much less a president that would say that. And therefore, the Constitution itself doesn't provide any remedy at all for this gravest offense against the Constitution by a president other than impeachment.
Now, an impeachment requires a majority support in the U.S. House and 2/3 support in the U.S. Senate for conviction. The numbers are not there for that. So what Judge Luttig is underscoring is that America is in uncharted waters if a majority of the public still believes in the authority of the U.S. Supreme Court and in the power, the binding power of the Constitution. Unfortunately, Judge Luttig and others who are trying to draw attention to Donald Trump's constitutional denialism, I don't think is ever going to spark or trigger Donald Trump to actually come out and explain or expand on what he told NBC News. Even Donald Trump must know that essentially denying the authority of the Supreme Court or the Constitution is going to pull horribly for him. And so Donald Trump is not going to tell the truth, even if he believes that he can ignore the Supreme Court and flaunt the Constitution. However, when a conservative, respected jurist like Michael Luttig comes out and talks about this, it behooves all of us to pay attention. The rule of law, our system of justice, is changing before our eyes. And Donald Trump's power grab is unprecedented. By the way, there are new questions now about Donald Trump's mental health, given some things that he has said recently.
Of course, you have the Declaration of Independence.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it means exactly what it says. It's a declaration. It's a declaration of unity and love and respect, and it means a lot, and it's something very special to our country.
Check out Terry Moran's perplexed face. You see, the Declaration of Independence is not a declaration of unity and love and respect. It lists 27 specific complaints against King George III and the British government. The colonists in the 13 colonies used the Declaration as a rallying cry to fight and kill British troops during the Revolutionary War. Check out that video at the link below. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us.